So, our speaker tonight is someone who doesn't need an introduction.
Follow it.
I think everybody can hear him anymore.
No.
You can hear
Oh,
me?
yeah.
Okay.
Higher.
So, this gentleman who's going to be speaking for us tonight doesn't need an introduction because we have heard him talk before. But all I'm going to do is take this little section out of the book, and that should say, I'm sorry, no, this is right, wrong page. Kerry, the writer, has an unmatched enthusiasm for understanding history and natural sciences. We are a lucky community, the Coachella Valley, to have him in our midst as his big heart inspires him to lead nature walks, hikes, and lectures to his audiences of all ages and abilities. Kerry Berman, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. You know, I can't believe how fast time goes by. 52 years ago, at 12 o'clock in the morning, I would get behind the desk at the Desert Hot Springs Spa. I was the night clerk there from 12 to 8 o'clock in the morning when Kermit Arns owned the property. And now, here I am. I never thought I would be in this position before to be able to pursue my passion. And I'm just delighted to be here. I'm blessed. I want, by way of introduction, if you Google Kerry Berman, you'll find out probably more than you ever wanted to know. But I want to share with you, I am hearing impaired, compliments of Vietnam. I was a tunnel rat and a radio operator for 8 months on the front lines, so my hearing kind of got botched up until the lieutenant says, "Is there anybody that can type?" And I go, "Like typing? That's the only thing I passed in school." So he promotes me to a secretary for Colonel Danowitz for my last 5 of my 13-month tour in Vietnam. So I think typing saved my life, because if you Google tunnel rat and radio operator, your life expectancy is 7 seconds. So being hearing impaired, like many of us are, and doing lectures and tours, it's wonderful. Because if people ask me a question, I don't know the answer, Judy, I just pretend like I didn't hear them. So it works out really good. But this presentation has been 6 years in the making. I was supposed to give this prior to COVID, and that's when I developed it. So now, welcome. This is indeed, I think the people we have pioneers in the room. We have a lot of people that have been here a long time. And those of you that haven't been here, let's say more than 20 or 30 years, you'll know more now in 1 hour than 99% of the people who live here full time. So, welcome the City of Health and Wellness, the most unique city in the world. Say, hey, I'm not getting paid to do this, so I can say this. You know, there's a saying, your walk talks and your talk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. At the end of this presentation, see if Desert Hot Springs Walk doesn't talk louder than our talk talks. So, with that said, water to well, to health to wealth, the City of Health and Wellness. I'm going to take you back a ways. I'm going to take you back to 1857. 1857, the Army Camel Corps, the Army was experimenting with camels to see if they were more conducive to working the desert than horses. They were pretty belligerent. They weren't very cooperative. But in 1857, the Army Camel Corps came up to this area and they saw 2 bunches of palms right below this hill. And on the map, they designated this area as two bunches of palms. Not two bunch palms, two bunches of palms. I'm going to give you the backstory on two bunch palms in just a minute. The most unique city in the world. This is our land. Please care for it. You know, sometimes I get very sad when I go around the city. It reminded me sometimes people, you know, our Native American Coeas, the Mission Creek Band of Coea Indians, have been on this land for over 8,000 years. The older books say, oh, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 years. When they were developing the Cultural Museum, the Agua Caliente Coea Indians, when they were digging the foundation, they went down about 15 feet. They hit artifacts. This is in 2023. They dated them back 8,500 years. So we know that the Mission Creek Band of Coea Indians has been on the land here for over 8,000 years. They were good stewards of the land. They were intelligent, they were artistic, they were creative, they were friendly, they were hunters and gatherers. They weren't warriors. And so everything that they needed to survive was just outside their back door where they lived. Everything, and I'll elaborate on the everything in just a minute. You know, I believe in 2013, the Bureau of Indian Affairs recognized the Mission Creek Band of Coea Indians as a legitimate band. If the feds had designated them a federally chartered band of Coea Indians, then we would have casinos up here. We would have tribal land. And by the way, the casinos that the Caliente, the Coea Nation own, all of the casinos on tribal land, the revenue doesn't just go to the Coeas. They revenue share with other tribes throughout the state of California that don't have casinos. So just an FYI. 66878. I was 1974. I bought that home on Desert View, just down from Cabot's. I paid $15,000 for it. I bought it VA. My payment was $150 a month, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And before they built the two homes across the street, I overlooked Palm Springs. It was magnificent. So now we have, on our left, we have Mount San Gorgonio, 11,503 feet above sea level. You know, it takes about 8 to 10 years for that snow melt to percolate into our Morongo Basin and eventually get into the Mission Springs aquifer. So when you talk about the quality of water, Jeff, I don't know of any other water district in the world that has more gold, more silver, and more bronze medals for the best tasting drinking water in the world than the Mission Springs Water District. The mineral content, if you know anybody that's manic depressive or bipolar, you know, all of us have lithium in our bodies. Some of us burn it up a little bit faster than others. Consequently, lithium is a very popular prescription. And when LW Coffee came out here in the 1930s to test the water with several hydrologists, they determined that lithium bicarbonate and the mineral content in this water is phenomenal. Best tasting drinking water in the world. Mount San Jacinto, it only takes about 5 to 6 years for that water to percolate into our aquifer in the Coachella Valley, which is separate from the Mission Springs aquifer. So you look tonight, coming in here from Palm Desert, what a mess. It was unbelievable. We don't call smog out here. We call it FPM. That's fine particulate matter. There was a lot of fine particulate matter. Renata's daughter, I mean, she was going down Varner, and it was like, you know, like blackout. It was like fog. Up here, because the air comes through the San Gorgonio Pass and then kind of makes a right-hand turn, so our air quality up here is substantially better than down valley, which is a good thing. So when we're out here in the spas sunbathing, and we see all the clouds on top of the mountain where they're getting 30 to 40 inches of precipitation. And by the time the clouds come over, we get 4 to 5 inches a year on the valley floor. So we're in 80 degree, 85 degree. We only have 2 seasons here, heaven and hell, right? So we go to heaven, Stanley, in October. We go to hell around June. So you know where we're headed.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any better than #1, best in the world. I love this graph. The San Andreas Fault. This is the only municipality in the valley on the North American tectonic plate. This is the only one. All the other cities, from Palm Springs all the way down to Borrego, are on the Pacific tectonic plate. So the San Andreas Fault starts at about the middle of the Salton Sea, and then it comes up to Desert Hot Springs, and it makes a left-hand turn, and then it goes through the San Gorgonio Pass. It's called a slip fault. It's not a thrust fault. It's not like the Northridge earthquake. It's not a subduction fault where one tectonic plate goes underneath the other. It's a slip fault. In other words, where Palm Springs is at, when LA City Hall was built in 1924, it's 9 feet closer to San Francisco than when it was built. Has anybody been up to Joshua Tree? Joshua Tree, just under 800,000 acres, thanks to the little old lady from Pasadena, Minerva Hoyt. Well, Joshua Tree, 20 million years ago, was just outside of LA in the San Gabriel Mountains. So the fault is slipping. The Pacific plate is going northwest about as fast as your fingernail grows, about 1.5 inches a year northwest. So it's a slip fault. I've heard some guys say, oh, when the next big one hits, it's going to be Palm Springs, will be Palm Beach. Impossible. It's not going to be Palm Beach. It's a right lateral strike slip fault. So the moral of the story is the roads will go a little cattywampus, but we haven't had a major magnitude. When I say major, like 1857, the Fort Tejon earthquake was like a 7.6. We haven't had a magnitude 7 or higher since 1880. There hasn't been a magnitude. So that I consider that to be a major shakeup. So I'd rather have the tectonic plates and the San Andreas Fault with all of this activity creating this phenomenal environment. The Peninsula Mountain Range goes from the San Gorgonio Pass all the way down to Cabo San Lucas. 150 million years ago, if we were here, this would have been the Pacific Ocean. This was all underwater. And the North American plate that we're on collided with a tectonic plate called the Farallon. Out over the Pacific, the Farallon was heavier than the granitic material on the North American plate. So consequently, what happened is this tectonic plate went underneath this North American plate, pushed the ocean out, added to California, and that went about 400 miles into the mantle, and it created the Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. Huge tectonic event. So people say, oh, I'm 5.2 in Julian. Not that bad. Probably since we've been working today, we've had 2 or 3 earthquakes. We average, most of them are all under 3 magnitude, so we don't feel them. 5.2, there was no, what I'm getting at is I'd rather have the tectonic plate activity out here than hurricanes and tornadoes and snow and ice. Otherwise, this would be as exciting as Kansas City. I mean, it would be like flat, no mountains. So we have a rain shadow mountain, right? 30 to 40 inches at the top, 4 to 5 on the valley floor. So Indio Hills, when you look out in Indio Hills, that used to be called Mud Hills. So what we have coming right through Desert Hot Springs, part of the San Andreas Fault, it goes up from the Salton Sea at Gulf Center Parkway, where Fantasy Springs Casino is located, and then it splits. And then there's a Mission Creek branch of the San Andreas Fault. That's on the North American tectonic plate, the continental plate. That goes directly under Two Bunch, directly under Desert Hot Springs. On the other side, we have the Banning Creek branch of the San Andreas Fault. So how did Indio Hills, used to be called Mud Hills, how did that get created? If you take an Oreo cookie and you put the, am I speaking okay? I mean, can you hear me okay back there? If you take an Oreo cookie and you put it in the sun and then you pick it up and you smush it together, that white stuff pops up, right? So the two tectonic plates, the Pacific and the North American, they're sliding and pushing against each other. So that's fault gouge. So we're right on. So this is, as I mentioned, the only city in the valley. The Sonoran Desert that people say, this is a Colorado desert. It's not the Colorado Desert. I mean, the Colorado River aqueduct wasn't started until 1933 and didn't complete until 1941. So this may be the Colorado portion of the Sonoran Desert, but this particular desert and some of the health resorts in Desert Hot Springs are the most biologically diverse health resorts in the world, specifically Two Bunch Palms. And I'll elaborate on that in just a little while. But the biological diversity out here is incredible. People, they don't understand, flora, plants in the desert have eeny, meeny, teeny, weeny leaves, little tiny leaves. The creosote, the rain bush, the first smell that you smell when it rains, that creosote, you Google greasewood, little stinker, rain bush, it'll all come up the same. Creosote has a little tiny leaf. So then you look out along all of these huge palms. How in the world do the palms survive with 4 to 5 inches on the valley floor? They need a lot of water. 99 9/10% of the people who live here don't have a clue as to how the water is able to penetrate through the sediment and come up to the surface and creating an oasis. When the tectonic plates shift, you have a shift. The water-bearing strata that comes from San Gorgonio and from San Jacinto, when it hits the sediment underground, the sediment is really fine. It's like flour. You put water on the flour, it beads off, but you mix it around, it turns into a dough. So the upshot is when the water-bearing strata hits the underground sediment, which is real fine, they make adobe out of it, like Cabot did. So it creates an impervious layer, a natural clay pipe encapsulating the water-bearing strata. So when the tectonic plates shift, this one goes bump down, it hits an impervious layer and pushes the water right up to the surface. At Two Bunch Palms, we have 2 gravity-fed wells at 140 and 150. And then we have another one that's, we have a pump on that's 138 degrees. So we have 3 hot water wells at Two Bunch. So anyway, this is how the water is pushed up, creating the palm oasis. That's why we have, so you look all along Indio Hills and you see all of those palms. That's as a result of the tectonic plates right there on the San Andreas Fault. The palm has to have their head in the water and their heads in the sun and their feet in the water. Got that right after a while. But anyway, the upshot, this palm is the only indigenous palm to California. It's the only native palm. It retains its skirt. Technically, we call it the Washingtonian foliifera. Common folk call it the desert fan palm or the California fan palm. It retains its skirt for the life of the palm unless it's burned or, somebody cuts off the skirts. So the upshot is when the Native Americans, when the Mission Creek Band of Cahuilla Indians saw these palms, they knew for a fact that the water table was at the surface or within 8 feet, because that's how deep the root ball is. So in areas around here, most of the palm oasis now, we've overdrafted our aquifers. Consequently, the water tables have dropped, so we don't have as many, waters above ground now as we used to have. This is interesting. The Coachella Valley Aquifer, we can hold approximately 39 million acre feet of water in the Coachella Valley Aquifer. It goes for about 15 miles wide and about 30 miles, about 60 miles long, all the way down underneath the Salton Sea. So it starts at San Gorgonio, where the wind turbines are at. It's about 1,600 feet above sea level, and it goes all the way down to the Salton Sea, which is 242 feet below sea level. So when the farmers came out here in the 1800s, 1880s, 1890s, and they were farming Coachella and Imperial, they had artesian wells, over 300 wells that were running 24/7, 365. In the early 1900s, they'd already determined that we were overdrafting the aquifer. So thank God for the Colorado River Aqueduct. There's an 18-mile tunnel through the Little San Bernardinos. So all the water that comes into the valley is gravity fed, no pumping stations. So it goes 242 miles from Lake Parker Dam, all the way into Lake Matthews in Riverside. Then there's a couple mile tunnel through Whitewater, and I think it's 8 or 9 mile tunnel through San Jacinto. So no pumping stations. We have that tunnel to avoid extra maintenance and stuff. So you could see what happens is when they're digging the wells down here, this water pressure is pushing all the way down. In spite of the fact that we're overdrafting our aquifer here in Desert Hot Springs, we still have some of the best tasting drinking water in the world. We are using Colorado River to recharge our aquifer, but still it's very hard to compete with our water quality anywhere else in the world. And you see what happens with the Colorado. If it wasn't for the Colorado River, when you overdraft your aquifer, what happens? It's like you take a sponge. You take a sponge and you fill it with water, and then you put it in the sun, and it goes, it subsides, it shrinks. When you take more water out of your aquifer than goes in, what happens? The ground subsides. Certain areas down valley, in the East Valley, has gone down as much as 2 feet. So we use the Colorado River water to recharge our aquifers. If we had to rely on nature solely, we wouldn't be here today. The ground would have subsided. It would have shrunk. So this is at Whitewater. This is when they open up the Colorado River Aqueduct, and it goes into our percolation ponds. 1850s, 1857, 2 bunches of palms. I know this is a British flag, but I wanted to show you what it would look like, if they were on camels. 2 bunches of palms. We still have 2 bunches of palms there. The first bunch is near the Twine, and the other bunch is kind of on the east end of 2 bunch palms. So Cabot, Yerxa, Cabot and Barb Carr, they come out here in 1913. They get off the Southern Pacific Railroad at Garnet, Indian, and I-10, and they walk up here 7 miles. And then because Abraham Lincoln in 1862 passed the Lands Act, the Homestead Act, they homesteaded. And Cabot homesteaded 160 acres. And so Cabot, he built several homes on the hill up here. But this one in particular is very interesting. I believe it's still where Audrey and Court Moe used to have Bubbling Wells Ranch. David owns it now, Don, about 108 acres. I believe that this, I was going to invite, a matter of fact, I invited the only person still alive. He is a legend, he is a hero, he is somebody that I wanted to come up here. He is a cardiologist. He worked at Desert Eisenhower. His mom, his grandma and grandpa, they owned B-Bar H Ranch in the early 40s. His name is Dick Rogers. Dick, at 12 years old, went into Cabot's old homestead, and he donated to Cabot's museum the Victrola and some records that he found in there. So Dick Rogers, this guy I met, he's come here. He's spoken to us before at the Historical Society. He was in the Army Special Forces. Being a cardiologist, being a doctor, you didn't have to go on the front lines. That wasn't Dick. He went on the front lines. He spent 12 months on the front lines. He's Silver Star recipient. He is a legend, a pioneer, a hero, and he couldn't make it tonight because he's got some medical issues that he's dealing with. But I'll show you a picture of him. Oh, this is, one second, I've got, my slide presentation, usually I see what the next slide is, but this is a quote that Nelson Mandela wrote. And I dream of the vast deserts, the forests, and all the wilderness of our continent, wild places that we should protect as a precious heritage for our children and for our children's children. We must never forget that it is our duty to protect this environment.
Amen.
That view, if you're here for the 4th of July and you don't have a view lot, which would be counter to the norm, because this city has the best topography of any city in the Coachella Valley when it comes to building and views and stuff. But if you don't have a view, just go up to Miracle Hill, and if you see a sign that says no trespassing, no fishing, no hunting, set up your lounge chair there and watch the fireworks right down below. And if anybody says like you're trespassing, just tell them, no, I know the owner. I bought it for my grandchildren. I'm not going to develop it. It has a gorgeous view of Desert Hot Springs and overlooking Palm Springs. So it's on Monterey. You're more than welcome to go up there. Cabot, right? He was married initially. They kind of went their separate ways around 1915. But in 1913, he came out here, and then they had a son, Rodney. Rodney was like 1 year old. And that's his mule, Merry Christmas. Most of you know Merry Christmas. Very close friend of Cabot Yerkes's. And so he'd go in 14-mile round trip to get water. And the Native Americans say, Cabot, you have water right underneath your property. So he digs a well. He goes down like 40 feet. He hits 132-degree geothermal water, hot water. And then he looks down below where Bubbling Wells Ranch is at, Cabot Yerkes Road, and he sees all this vegetation. Well, how can the vegetation grow in 132-degree water? So he goes down about 600 yards, digs another well, and hits cold water. Consequently, he calls Eagle's Nest on Miracle Hill because of the hot and cold water. So, and this is Miracle Hill up here, 2 bunch bombs down here. What other city in the world? This is how it happened. This is a brochure from Miracle Springs, but this is the same thing that happened on Miracle Hill with Cabot. He went down and he hit the hot geothermal aquifer, and then there's an impervious layer that separates the cold water from the geothermal waters. And so that's how he ended up. He went down and he dug and he hit the cold water. So, Mission Creek branch of the San Andreas Fault. I mentioned this is a oasis on Bubbling Wells Ranch that Audrey and Court used to. Oh, this is cool. A lot of mafia activity in the 30s and 40s. I'm going to clear up, and you can fact check me on this, the backstory about Al Capone. Okay? There's a guy. Al Capone was born in New York. He moved to Chicago, becomes the head of the Italian mafia, right? 1931, they bust him for bootlegging whiskey from Canada through Detroit, Michigan, into Chicago. He doesn't show up for court. They throw him in jail for 1 year for contempt. He gets out in 1932. He moves to Florida. The feds bust him for tax evasion and other felonies. They throw him in the penitentiary in Georgia. 1934, they transfer him from the penitentiary in Georgia to Alcatraz. 1939, bear in mind, 1939, where 2 Bunch Palms is at that time, it was called 2 Bunches of Palms. There was 2 bunches of palms there. So Al Capone is in Alcatraz, 1939, he gets out, they send him to an asylum on Terminal Island. And then in the 40s, he passes away from syphilis and other health complications. So the moral of the story is, Al Capone couldn't have possibly ever been at 2 Bunches of Palms because it wasn't even built. It was the Purple Gang, the Jewish mafia, that was the inspiration, the motivation for the developer of 2 Bunch to build the casino and the brothel, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. There's a guy by the name of, see if you can put the pieces together. His name is Al Wertheimer. Al Wertheimer was in Detroit, Michigan. He was one of the higher-ups in the Jewish mafia. The Purple Gang was more feared than the Italian mafia. They were bad dudes. By the end of the 1920s, the Purple Gang was almost history. 1930s, almost history, almost gone. A guy by the name of Al Wertheimer. Al Wertheimer was in the hierarchy of the Purple Gang. Al Wertheimer would bootleg whiskey from Canada through Detroit into Al Capone. So, did they know each other? 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Al Wertheimer and Al Capone orchestrated the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So the 2 Als knew each other very well. 1934 Purple Gang is just about history. Al Wertheimer moves to Palm Springs, and he goes to Nellie Kaufman. Nellie is the matriarch of Palm Springs. Her and Dr. Kaufman, they opened up the Desert Inn Hotel and Sanitarium in 1909. So in 1934, Al Wertheimer goes to Nellie, and Nellie at that time, not only is she a matriarch, she's like the city planning commission, she's like the city council, she's like the mayor. You don't do anything unless Nellie said it's okay. So Al Wertheimer goes to Nellie and says, Nellie, I'm going to build a casino in your community and it'll attract a lot of people. She says, forget it, no way. So what does he do? He goes next door to Cathedral City off of Date Palm, and he builds the Dunes Club, the most exclusive casino in the valley. Matter of fact, Charlie Farrell and Ralph Bellamy, who built the Racket Club in the early 30s, they would take Norma Jean and their other guests over to the Dunes Club. Al Werthimer didn't want the locals spending money in the casino, so they screened their guests very, very thoroughly to make sure, because they didn't want the local folks losing money in the casino. So, Charlie and Ralph, they would take Norma Jean and their other guests over to the Dunes Club. So, and this is an aerial photo. All of this, salt cedar, this is tamarisk that you see along the railroad tracks. And Al Werthimer, his experience with the Purple Gang, he had a lot of experience with law enforcement. So they didn't bother him in the 30s and most of the early 40s. And so he builds this in 1935. The next year, he goes back into Palm Springs and he builds the Colony House. The Colony House, a little boutique hotel. And if you go through this here, this is the pool. Let me see something. Okay. You go through in the back there's a restaurant and then the kitchen, and then you go downstairs behind the pantry and you go into the casino. And so this behind the pantry here, you go the casino, and then to the right is a brothel. And I was down there, I took pictures there. Not when it was a brothel, but that's the scoop. That was a casino and a brothel. So
where on Date Palm was the Dunes Club? What's there now?
it's very, very, where on Date Palm was it located? Not far across the street from the new Agua Caliente Casino, about a half a mile up on the right-hand side of Date Palm. Okay? So there's a guy and gal by the name of Thomas and Billy Lips. Thomas and Billy Lips, they have a beautiful hotel, the Hotel del Taquas in Palm Springs. During World War II, they would let the servicemen double up in the rooms, and most of the hotels would close. Too hot during the summer, but they'd stay open all year long. So the veterans, they were kindred spirits. They used to call Thomas's wife Mama Lips. So the servicemen really appreciated the hospitality. Thomas Lips knows Al Werthimer. He goes to Al, he says, Al, I'm going north and I'm gonna build a casino. 1939, Thomas Lips goes up to 2 bunches of palms and builds a casino, which is now the restaurant. The brothel was downstairs, and when he bought the property, it was 2 bunches of palms. But then he changed the name to the Desert Spa. It wasn't until 1959 that they changed the name to 2 Bunch Palms. So Al Capone was never there. Al Werthimer was the inspiration, the motivation for Thomas Lips, the Purple Gang, the Jewish Mafia, for Thomas to come out and build the casino and the brothel. So this is what it looked like when Thomas went up there, 2 bunches of palms. So all of this sensationalism about Palm Spring Life magazine, they have 1925, home, 2 bunch palms, home to Al Capone. No, incorrect. 1939, this original grotto, this, after it was no longer used as a brothel, then they use it for, massage therapy rooms and stuff like that. Really, it's like a museum downstairs. The tile and the tubs and stuff are gorgeous, but they don't want to open it up, 2 Bunch is very unique. It's the most exclusive, most unique, most biologically diverse health resort in the world. We have 277 acres. Only 77 acres are improved. The other 200 are open space. Say, well, how could you say that, Kerry, about not almost one of the most, but the most? I have, in my 12 years of leading historical walks there, I've had people from all over the world. Nobody has told me another health resort on 277 acres that you'd never have to leave for anything. The Mission Creek Band of Cahuilla Indians lived on that property for over 8,000 years. They had food, they had clothing, they had building materials, they had medicine, they had hot geothermal water, they had cold water. The shaman were their doctors. So the moral of the story is, I don't know of another resort on 277 acres in the world that you'd never have to leave. L.W. Coffey, Cabot's friend that he met in Moore Park when Cabot had a market there. L.W. Coffey was a builder. And Cabot says, Coffey, you gotta come out here. This water is incredible. There's hot water, there's cold water. So in the 1930s, he comes out with hydrologists. They test the water, they test the mineral content, and he just falls in love with the place. 1941, he names this Desert Hot Springs, the city of health and wellness. Over 2,000 people attended the opening of the bathhouse. That was in 1941. So we've got so much upside potential in this community. It is unbelievable. First bathhouse, 1941. Cabot's Hopi Indian Pueblo, you know, he never really got it finished. He passed away in 1965, at 1965, in his 80s, and then Cole Erod, they were going to demolish it. The city was going to demolish Cabot Yerkes' place, but Cole Erod, he wouldn't let him. And so Cole finally acquired the place, and then when he passed away, the heirs donated it to the city of Desert Hot Springs, and now it's one of the most phenomenal attractions here in the valley. So thank goodness for that. This, you can't see this because there's not a white screen here, but this little guy, there's a little guy sitting next to his mom. That's Dr. Dick Rogers. His grandparents bought the B-Bar H Ranch in the early 1940s. And you name any of the celebrities during that time, the 30s and the 40s, you know, people don't understand why there's so many celebrities out here. Because if you were under contract with the studios in Hollywood, you couldn't go any further than 2 hours. So Las Vegas was out. B-Bar H Ranch was in. Palm Springs, the movie colony, that was in. That's what happened. So that's why we ended up with so many celebrities. This is a picture of Dick Rogers. Legend, war hero, Silver Star recipient, front lines of Vietnam, pioneer of Desert Hot Springs. His home is about a half a block from Eisenhower Medical Center. It's about on 2 acres of land there. It is a museum. It's fabulous. Dick, very, very low profile, quiet guy, but I mean, he is just incredible. So I wanted him to be here, but he said, Kerry, I don't feel that good. Topography, nowhere else. I don't care, Rancho Mirage, you know, Indian Wells, La Quinta, the topography here, almost all the lots have views overlooking the valley. You know, we had at one time in the early 1980s, we had over 4,000 wind turbines. This place looked like the house of the rising sun. You know, red lights blinking all over the place and stuff. Now we have about 500 turbines producing the same amount of electricity as the 4,000 plus in the early 80s. Enough wind energy for approximately 245,000 homes. We have a 4.2 megawatt turbine, one turbine, 4.2 megawatt. The biggest in the San Gorgonio Pass. One turbine, 1,500 homes. One turbine. On Edom Hill, where the Beer Tech, the garbage, the waste dump is located, there's 8 turbines, 2.5 megawatt. They replaced 139 of the older generation turbines with the 8 2.5 megawatt. Each one of those turbines on Edom Hill produces enough energy for 750 homes. 6,000 for that wind farm. So that's pretty interesting. So look at this topography.
Did they take several thousand of the older wind turbines out of the area? Did they?
What do they do with the?
Yeah.
What do they do with the old solar panels and the old wind turbines? And that's a problem. We do, ship them to other countries and stuff, but their amortization period is about 25 years. And solar about the same, about 25 years. So I was talking to Jeff, because we always have discussions about what are we going to do with the pass. We've got so much land out there, there's so much potential, but what are we going to develop out there? So when I talk about renewable energy, I say, look, we're not going to replace petroleum. We're not going to replace fossil fuel. We need a balance between renewables, wind, solar, hydroelectric, biomass, geothermal. Geothermal is the most efficient of all of the electrical producers. Geothermal, the capacity factor is around 90 to 95%. In other words, if the wind blew 24/7 or the sun shined 24/7, the capacity factor would be 100%. But the highest capacity of renewables is geothermal, about 90 to 95, higher than natural gas. That peaker plant out there, they paid $900 million. That peaker plant is an 800 megawatt plant, natural gas. Fire it up when the peak demand for energy, they can pick, that's enough energy for 640,000 homes. So it can take care of all of the Coachella Valley and into Riverside. Desert Hot Springs Vortex. People go, ooh, that's kind of like voodoo stuff. I've been up to Cabot's, where the mesquite tree is up in the back of the patio there, and it's all kind of contorted and stuff. This area is very similar to like Sedona. Sedona is a very sacred place to the Native Americans. The vortex, the positive vortex, the ley lines, according to those people that know about vortexes, say the ley lines converge right up at Cabot's. Why? Why do we have a vortex here? Because we're totally surrounded in natural resources. We have the mountains, we have the tectonic plates, we have the aquifers, we have the geothermal water, we have air, we have wind. So all of the natural components that make up a vortex are right here in the valley, and specifically, we're here at about 1,070 feet above sea level in Desert Hot Springs. And fortunately, because we're on this side of the tracks, the air quality is better than down valley. If you're hot or if you're not, Desert Hot Springs is a spot. Solar and wind energy at its best, sunshine 350 days a year. Topography, best view lots in the Sonoran Desert, only city in the valley on the Mission Creek branch of the San Andreas Fault, world famous hot and cold aquifers with excellent pH, average temperature geothermal water 130 to 140, historical value, world leaders, movie stars, artists, pioneers, etc. Visit here. When you go to Two Bunch Palms, I do this historical walk for Two Bunch, and I also work with the colonists at Smoke Tree Ranch, the two most exclusive historical resorts in the valley. You can't tell the millionaires from the billionaires. They fly under the radar. They take their jewelry off. They walk around in bathrobes and sandals. You go by Two Bunch Palms, no sign, no sign. It's all dirt. Everything's dirt. And the new owners, since 2015, they paid very close attention to indigenous native plants. So I'm very happy to say that we have more California fan palms. You know, the Washingtonian Folifera, that was discovered, a German horticulturalist over in Europe in the 1890s. He saw them growing in a hothouse. So he names it Washingtonian after George, and Folifera because there's a lot of fiber and thread on the palm fronds that the Native Americans used. So we got situated in the most biologically diverse desert in the world, medicinal and therapeutic value, rich in minerals and lithium, surrounded by 5 mountain ranges, positive vortex, more metals for the best tasting water in the world. Amen.
Amen and amen.
So, you know, here, you know what this is here? You know what that's called? Does anybody know what it's called? Along 62 on the left side? It's called Devil's Garden. Devil's Garden. The little old lady from Pasadena, Minerva Hoyt, her husband was a doctor, he passed away. Minerva, 1914, the Panama Canal was opened up. A lot of migration into Los Angeles. During the 20s, the fad was botanicals, succulents, cactus, landscaping, desert landscaping. Truckloads were coming out here, and they completely denuded the whole area along 62. So they called it Devil's Garden. Minerva was very, very upset. She put together a very beautiful display. They ship it back east. Franklin Delano Roosevelt got wind. 1936, little old lady from Pasadena, Minerva Hoyt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed into law Joshua Tree National Monument. 1994, President Clinton, Joshua Tree National Park. Right? The highest level of protection. This valley is the most protected valley in North America. There's no other valley that has corridors for the plants and animals. We have the Chuckwalla National Monument. We have the Joshua Tree National Park. We have the Morongo Preserve. We have the Santa Snow. We have the Santa Rosa San Jacinto National Monument. So we have corridors in perpetuity that will not be built on for the plants and the animals to enjoy and for us to recreate in. So this is quite a sensational place. And these pictures, Desert Hot Springs Historical Society, Palm Springs Historical Society, Cabot's Pueblo, Courtney and Audrey Moe, Bowman Wells Ranch, Two Bunch Palms, Coachella Valley Water District, Mission Springs Water District, Desert Water Agency, Jeff and Judy Bowman. Jeff represents us, the Desert Water Agency, and he and Judy are pretty much, you know, pioneers that really, past president of the Historical Society. So I want to end this presentation. We've had some difficult times in the last several years, so I want to share with you, some of you may have heard this before, but it's a poem. It's called Don't Quit Now. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. You see, success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt, and you can never tell how close you are. You may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem the worst that we must not quit. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.